Is this thing on? Good evening. Welcome to Design Systems Community Meetup number 5. Here we are at Rangle.io. There's your Wi-Fi, there's your water, there's your pizza, and don't forget the restrooms are out of the entrance, down the hall, stage right, this direction. Pick a bathroom you like, they're all for you. Let's begin. Today, we have a topic of design systems for small teams. We have 2 great talks lined up for you, and this was a high-demand meetup. We heard your recommendations for small team relevancy. Here, we deliver. And before we begin and do anything else, we start with a land acknowledgement. The land I'm standing on today is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. The reason we have a land acknowledgement at Design Systems Community is because we do our best to make this an inclusive space, and also to ensure that we're fighting for social change. And when it comes to Indigenous rights, there's so much more we could be doing, but at the very least, we can do a land acknowledgement. This is not everything, but this is a beginning. That brings us to our code of conduct. On our website, we have a code of conduct. It took effect the moment you walked in here today, but to keep it simple, please respect others. Keep it legal. Play nice, uphold our conduct and our values, and protect your privacy. Essentials. I can never repeat this enough. Restrooms are this way, stage right. Food and refreshments are this way and that away. Please be respectful of the space. This was graciously provided by Rangle. Thank you, Rangle. If you need any help or questions or concerns, talk to someone wearing this yellow shirt. Whether they're a volunteer or organizer, we're all here to help you. The Wi-Fi is Rangle Guest, and the password is InZerovation. Great password. Finally, I get to tell you who we are. My name is Enrico Sacchetti, and I'm one of the co-organizers.
My name is Varun. I'm also a co-organizer.
Hi, I'm Lucy, organizer.
Thanks, Lucy.
Sweet. Next, we're going to get to the Design Systems Community values. And we have 7 values. So when you're actually building a design system, I'm pretty sure you're considering all of these values. But these are not only for when you're building a system, it's also for our meetup. So we make sure things are accessible. We want to enable diversity and inclusivity in our audience and our speakers. We want to enable community and sharing across. Always our number 1 focus is customer. So you are our customer, so you are our focus. Collaboration, so everyone can collaborate. You have enough time for networking at the end. And then bridging content, design, and code. Soon we're going to have a meetup on content in design systems. And last, and the most important one for me, is having fun. So please have fun.
Please have fun.
I also want to take some time out to talk about one of the accomplishments that happened with Design Systems Community. We recently got 1,000+ members on our meetup. So I really want to thank all of you here, all our sponsors, speakers, volunteers, and contributors. They've done immense work, and we're here. And we're not stopping. We're just going to grow and do more cool stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. You did this.
And a big thank you to Rangle. Varun, Joanna, Anam, and Natalia, they've all been excellent. They're actually our gold sponsor, and they've invested in helping the community out. So really a big thank you to all of you. And next, I'm going to give it to Varun, the other Varun from Rangle, to talk about Rangle.
Thanks, Varun.
Hey everyone, welcome to Rangle. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rangle, but we're a consultancy that specializes as a full-service consultancy, so everything from design, development, back-end development, front-end development, and design systems. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but Rangle started off as a meetup about 6 years ago, and a value that's really baked into the company is about learning and sharing our knowledge. So not only do we support meetups and other events, but we also today launched our design system hub. You can find it at Rangle.io/design systems. We're going to be sharing all kinds of resources and thoughts from people who work at Rangle, who specialize in design systems, and share some of the stories from design systems we've built with our clients. I'll just leave you with one question. How many of you here are working on a design system or trying to start a design system at your company, but struggling to get buy-in from your executives? Cool. So if you're interested, come talk to one of the Rangle folks who are standing back there. They're wearing the R Triangle t-shirt, and we would love to talk to you and hear about sort of what kind of challenges you're going through. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's the agenda for today. So first, we're going to have Diogo from League, going to be talking about design systems on a rocket ship. Next, we're going to have Jake and Mostafa from Snaptravel, going to be talking about launching a lean design system. In between the talks, we're going to have a Q&A section as well, so if you have any questions, just wait till the end. And at 7:40, we're going to have some closing remarks. There's going to be a feedback form, and then about 20, 25 minutes for networking and hanging out with the folks here. Oops.
So I'm just going to introduce our first speaker. It's Diogo. He's a senior product designer at League, spearheading the League's design system. Janosik? Yeah. So his mission, actually, do you guys know what League does? No. So he might. Yeah. So I actually use their software at Shopify. So they do all of our benefits and take care of all of our perks and stuff like that. So I've firsthand experienced what they do. And so it's super friendly, super intuitive. Like when you think about benefits and stuff like that, it's super like 90s and like, yeah. So you guys do a great job. So his personal mission is to help people live better and healthier lives through thoughtful design. He drinks a lot of coffee. Lover of soccer, architecture, movies, music, and dogs. His talk is on, the title is Design System on a Rocket Ship. So he'll just talk about strategies to get buy-in from the right people, grow a design system, and navigate the challenges that come up.
Yep.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Diogo.
Switch. Got it. Thank you. Right, how's everyone doing? Can everyone hear me okay? I think so. It's so weird to hear myself speak. I don't know. Hi everyone. It's not showing over there. Good. Maybe not. Sorry. Technical. Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. No, that's me.
Is it any wonder why people are afraid of technology? Technology!
Here we go. Okay. Cool. You can see the font that it took me a day to pick. It's really good though. Hi, my name is Diogo. I'm a senior product designer at League, currently living and working in Toronto. If you don't know League, we're a company based in Toronto. We are just outside at Kingan University. It's about 5 minutes from here. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about League, what we do, but mostly how we got our design system off the ground. But to do that, I need to give you a little bit of context of what League is. And we're actually working on the future of healthcare. Like we're making changes to health, which is a very complicated space. And we're trying to make it personalized and always on and user-centric. And it's an industry that is in dear need of restructuring, disruption, and we're on the forefront of that. Our mission is to empower people to live healthier and happier lives every day. Our team, as you can see, kind of has grown. I joined around 2018 in the middle. We were 3 product designers, now we're 8. We were about 35 developers, now we're 62. So in a year and a half, it's been a huge growth. So that's why all of us that work at League, like we feel like we're in a rocket ship because it's always going up, it's always going fast. So we're trying to build a design system to help us with that scale. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that, but we basically build products and tools for people, members, HR admins, and our League employees. So we're in multiple platforms. We're web, Android, iOS, and it's with that fast-growing team, it's very challenging. So that's where Genesis comes in. One of the ways to solve those challenges is with the design system. We named it Genesis, and I'm gonna talk to you about how we got it off the ground with the challenges. I saw a couple people like raise their hands that they're trying to get a design system started, they're trying to figure out buy-in, and I'm gonna give you some of the tips that worked for us. But that's exactly it, like it worked for us. Your company is unique, and not just the product needs, but the people that work there, the environment, like it's not just about the design system, it's about everything that's around it. So each design system basically is different, and I don't think there are any universal solutions. So it might not work for your company, it might work. I just hope you take some inspiration out of this, and it actually gives you some advice that you can bring to your company. Where did we start? I think like we started like almost every company, basically disorganized, small, we're just trying to get shit done, and sorry for swearing sometimes. But yeah, but we had a vision, right? Like we had something that we wanted to do. We had something that we knew we wanted to achieve. Actually, when I started, we had a static style guide. It was living in vision. It was there. You can see that there's like some Atlassian kind of look-alike style there. But yeah, so we had our own style guide, and the engineering team had their UI kit. And those two things were not really talking together. It was basically, we did our thing, they did our thing, their thing. There was no real collaboration between the teams. There was no process, no maintenance. It was basically just there. And that's when I joined and more people joined, we started talking like, how does this work? Like, that's not how it's supposed to work. So we just changed the way we work. We're like, we need to do something, we need to change this process, and we just started investing in it as a team. No one was telling us from top down, hey, like you're a design team, you shouldn't be spending time creating a better style guide. You shouldn't be spending time auditing your components. You shouldn't be doing that. No one was telling that. So we just did it on our own. We went in, we started documenting, we started auditing, we started that process. Started bringing developers also into the process, right? Because like I mentioned before, it's kind of like separate, each one would do their own thing. And we actually started like bringing everyone to start like, we can't do this alone, so started working with the developers. And we create our information architecture, so that was very important because it told us, it was the first step that we did actually, and it was for us to understand like, what is this design system supposed to be? Like, what is it that we're going to be addressing here? So we had things like our brand, our marketing, our voice and tone, our personality, our ethics, like what is our company about? Like our mission is part of the design system. Like the design system should be about everything. It's not a product for the design team or the developer, it's a product for the company, right? So that's something that we realized that was really important and gave us a mission. We also defined our design principles and audited components, started documenting, and we're like, well, we're golden. Like this, like moving forward, everything is looking great, but not really, because then we're like, we hit a wall, like there's no else to go from here, right? If it's just us, there's nowhere else to go. We were not seeing the real impact that we wanted to have, like the real value of a design system. We all know that. We all know the value of a design system. We're not seeing that. So we couldn't do it alone. And I just want to start by saying design systems aren't easy. And there's dozens of Medium articles that might tell you, hey, it's so easy to build a design system. Just audit your components, design them, and then someone will build it, and that's it. It's not really how it is. Like a design system takes effort. Like a design system takes time, takes resources and focus away from features, so it needs to be prioritized. It requires maintenance, and they also need support and like constant communication. It's not one thing that it's one and done, right? So it's a big undertaking. So if you're seeing pushback from people, you need to understand that there's a reason why, right? It's not just because they're pushing back because they feel like it, or they don't understand designers or developers. But yeah, I think like to us, it was really interesting to understand that it can be really a grassroots effort. Like companies need to treat a design system as a real product, prioritize it, and products take work. They need to be part of the roadmap. So we really asked ourselves, how can we get real buy-in for a design system? How can we get the company to support this initiative? And you'll hear people ask, what's the value? How will it help on our day-to-day? When it goes stale, like, isn't it just for like mature teams? Aren't you just supposed to make things look pretty? Like things like that, those are questions that people will ask. And sometimes it might seem impossible, and we had those challenges, we faced some of those challenges. But what I'm here today to tell is that there's hope. We had those challenges, we had those people ask those questions, and we found a way. So how can we get the real value of a design system and earn the support and trust from the stakeholders? I think the first step is to really uncover an opportunity, right? Like, think outside of your bubble, your design developer bubble, pay attention to what's happening around you, and try to listen to the problems. Like, what are the pain points the people are talking about in your company? They're not designers, not developers, maybe other people, they have pain points. And how can your design system solve those problems? At League, we started listening. We started understanding what our CEO was saying. We're understanding like what our business team was saying. And you'd say that one of the things that we heard was that clients expect more. That was on our case. Like, we had this client, and one of the things they really wanted was to make sure our product was accessible. So we had to run audits, we had to see how well we perform or we didn't perform. And that was something that was really eye-opening, where we're like, okay, to get this big, massive client, we need to make big changes on our product to make sure it meets the accessibility standards that they hope for in a product that works with them, right? So to them, that was an eye-opening, like, oh shit, like this is not really accessible. We need to spend so much time making it, get it to that level. So that would cost a lot of money. So that's something that business cares about. Another thing is that tech debt has real impact. There's a lot of developers, a lot of product managers trying to build new features or change old features, and they're like, I don't even want to touch that. Like, that's too complicated. That's like old code. I don't want to see it. So it just stays the way it is. So it doesn't help the company grow. Experience is inconsistent. This is the one thing that we start seeing from members, but then again, even our company, everyone, like the executives, everyone that works there, they're also members, and they start looking at our features, and they start seeing, why does this feature look like it's 2016, and this feature looks modern, even though it's the same product? You're just like moving from one page to the other, right? And it's because of that, like there's tech debt, there's things that you can change, so this is something that a design system could solve. But at the end of the day, it really came down to this, like we're aiming higher, we're trying to do new things, we're trying to grow, and we need to set up the foundation, the infrastructure to allow us to get there. And once we saw the benefit that a design system could have and the ability to create multiple products always with one design system, you just theme it differently, you change a few things, the exact same components, you can just scale, create multiple products, pivot, do whatever you want. When they saw the real value there, that's when we got the real buy-in. And we saw the opportunity really, like, and to us, like, we just saw this whole thing as a way to change and better support our business. So to us, this is our opportunity, and this is what we use to frame the pitch. But to be honest, like, just I think this is really important, is like, don't get buy-in for a design system, get buy-in for what it represents to your company. What it is that a design system will enable you to do. I think that's really the message, because the design system is so abstract that a lot of people have a hard time grasping the concept of a design system if it's not framed in the right mindset. And this goes to my second point, which is really sell your vision. And even though it's your vision, it's a vision for everyone. So you need to understand who are the decision makers, who are the people that in your company make the calls. And you have to pitch to them. And sometimes it could be the CEO, the CTO, the PM. Sometimes you're in a small team, it's just the founder that you need to talk to and say, like, this is how we're going to set it up for success in the future. So, but for instance, if you need to kind of know who you're speaking to. That's also very important, right? Like if you say to a developer, oh, this is gonna reduce 25% cost on our development, a developer would probably be like, what does it matter to me? Like, I don't care about development costs, like you're paying me, right? So how can you really sell something to someone who doesn't care? I think that's the trick, right? So I think a key is to really speak their language, right? Like when someone's going to buy a drill, no one's gonna be like, oh, I want a 1/4 inch drill. They want a 1/4 inch hole. Or actually, they actually want a picture on the wall. That's what they want. They don't care about the drill. It's not the drill that's gonna make them want that drill. It's really the picture on the wall. So framing it in the mindset, figure out what's the picture on the wall for the people in your company. What we did is that we created basically 3 versions of the same pitch. We had the same pitch, we had the same opportunity. How can we frame it in different minds? So we had this business pitch that I put up on a town hall. The whole company business was there, CEO was there. This is why a design system is gonna change our company. Then I had one for developers. See there, someone else writes 90% of your CSS. They're like, great, I don't have to write CSS anymore. And then I had one for product managers. You don't have to QA as much because everything's accessible and it just works. Great. So making sure that you speak their language, it's the #1 thing, in my opinion, to actually get the buy-in from people. See here, like this is one slide deck for product managers that had their goals. And we frame our goals on their goals as well. So basically get buy-in early, continuously advocate for the system. That's another thing that I think is really, really important, is that it just doesn't, it's not just one meeting where you're like, hey, we're doing a design system, people give you this thumbs up and that's it. Like you need to continuously advocate, like things like when you're talking to your team, always being able to mention, hey, like there's a better way to do this, right? Or anytime you can, like, first of all, like get a name for your design system. We got Genesis, that was the name. Not my favorite. Everyone voted, it's like a democracy, I'm okay with it. We call it Genesis, so we're going with it. But every time that you can, just use that name. Every time bring it up, like, oh, that's something that Genesis could do. That's something that we should do with Genesis. So just keeping that top of mind every time that you're talking to people goes a long way because it just gets in people's minds. And now that we have the opportunity, now that we have buy-in from everyone, we're golden, right? Now we gotta make progress, right? Like we have buy-in, we have everything going, but we need to really start having impact. But that also had its challenges. So even if you get buy-in, it's not easy to just get it up and running. So in 2019, we created our roadmap. We started the kickoff, everyone bi-weekly meetings, started a project plan. Basically everything was good. Q2, we started trying to build components. It was our first attempt. Notice the first part of it. Yeah, it was our first attempt at building components. We started some infrastructure work. We were able to get something done. Documentation was great. Q2 came along, and then Q3, we had our second attempt. This is when we were doing our sprints, and we were like, okay, let's bring our tickets into sprints. We talked to project managers. We're like, okay, let's get 4 story points. Only 4 story points per sprint. That's nothing. We can get some progress done. And when it came to sprint planning, we were like, maybe not, you know, like there's this feature and we have this release date, and maybe we'll leave those 4 story points. We'll make it 8 next time. That'll never happen. That honestly never happened. And that's okay, because like when you're in the zone, or when you're building the product, or when you're shipping a feature, you're not thinking about like the long-term goals. You're thinking about what can I release as fast as I can. And Genesis were something that could be pushed. Right, like that, it doesn't matter if it's this week or next week, it could be pushed. This feature can't. So we had a hard time to really getting buy-in and making real progress. So for Q4, we kind of changed our goal. We're not putting more words on a paper and saying we're gonna build these components, putting it in Jira. We said, for Q4, we're gonna build this page. This was our new sign-in page. We're gonna do it all just using Genesis components. That's it. And it became something that was like tangible for a real scenario, so people could grasp it. They're like, we're going to build all the components that will enable to build this in, okay, I don't want to say 2 hours, but yes, really quick. And that really got buy-in. And then we also started, once we got kind of that understanding, we started planning it. So we all got in a room, front-end developers, designers, and we're like, okay, what is going to take for us to build this, right? So how many people we need, that was also something that we kind of tried to figure out, and our estimation was that it was about a week for 9 front-end developers, and we'd get the Genesis sign-in page. This would basically decrease like the front-end capacity in 60% and the designer capacity in 20% for a week, right? Doesn't seem like a lot of effort, and we'd get a lot of it done. And a lot of people saw like, oh, it's the Genesis sign-in page. To us, we saw this. So in 1 week, this is what we would deliver. And this is what we kept to ourselves. For everyone else, we basically said we're building this. But this is what we understood as a team, as an initiative, that it would really give us the next step. So we went to everyone and we pitched the 1-week Genesis sprint. We said, there won't be distractions during sprints, so we'll just focus the whole quarter's work into a 1-week sprint. That's it. And it's only a few people, it's not everyone in the company, so there's still gonna be work done. We're not just gonna stop everything. So we created the sprint. Well, I mean, we didn't create it. We planned it, we pitched it, then we went to stakeholders again, and I'm like, hey, guys, I'm gonna need some support here again. We told everyone that it would just be a 1-week thing, and it wouldn't have a major impact. So that was great. Like, we got buy-in, and honestly, we got buy-in because we already had buy-in before, right? So like the concept was already in their mind. They already understood the value of a design sprint, of a design system. So we condensing it that they're like, okay, 1 quarter is 1 week of work, that's fine. So we got, and honestly, we ran the sprint in the end of November last year. So it took us basically 1 year of planning, of like thinking about it to actually get to the point that we wanted to get. But yeah, it was definitely fundamental. This is us working. We basically took a corner of the office and we sit there for like 5 days. It was honestly great. Like everyone said at the end of, kind of ran a survey, see how people felt about it, and it was honestly one of the highlights of the year is that people were able to work together, collaborate, designers, developers, and actually get shit done. So it was very inspiring to see that. Why was it successful? Basically, we had clear objectives and deliverables. It was time boxed, quick decisions, company-wide visibility, and it was a shared experience. So that whole thing, in the end, really made us feel like the sprint was successful. We ended up with a bunch of components in Storybook, and at the end of the sprint, basically all those components were available for any developer to use in the product. So that was really the goal that we wanted, and we had liftoff, and we made real impact, and still lots to do. Honestly, there's never enough time to do everything, but the hardest part, I really do believe that's behind us, and now that the system is in place and it just exists, it's a lot easier to maintain and to keep adding to it and building it because it's already part of our day-to-day work. And I'm sure that by now you must be asking, what about mobile, right? Like I've been talking about front-end developers and designers, but I did mention that we have an iOS and Android app. For mobile, we took a different approach. So this is gonna go to my last point, which is really about adapting to your teams, right? Like nothing is ever a one-size-fits-all. This is the usual process. I'm not gonna go through it. You guys kinda know it. Sometimes it doesn't work. It doesn't work for our mobile teams. It didn't work for our mobile teams for sure. They were shipping very, very fast, and we didn't have time to just wait for documentation and then build your stuff, right? So we kinda needed to operate differently. We got to think differently and just go with it. So we basically turned things upside down. We built first, and then we started collecting them to a library later. And that's also okay. Like, there's no one way of doing things. To us, basically, we designed the components in our features. We implemented the components in the app. So as part, without thinking, okay, is this component scalable? Where is it going to go? Can we use it in other parts of our product? No, we just designed the feature the way we were going to design it. Then the developers basically implemented the new components, created them, grabbed them into their own library because they wanted to reuse across developers, And now we're in the process of auditing the design, and there's totally buy-in from them. They're like, hey, like, tell us how it should change. Tell us how we can make it better, and we'll totally do it. But the real benefit of that is that we only write each component once. So usually in design systems, you write a component once, twice, 3 times, then it's reusable. Now let's make it a real component that you can use everywhere. Here, they already built it. It's already there. So designers can view the actual implementation. You're not thinking, how is this going to look when it's actually implemented? You can go to the app that they actually created an app just to host their components. So it's basically their Genesis. This is the iOS app that has all the components that they've built. And we can go there and see and test and see if we need to change. And there's also faster adoption because everyone, other mobile developers, they can just go into this library and grab it and use it. So there's no issue with that. Okay, now we have to tell everyone that this is available. And yeah, it's already built in the app. So just to recap, uncover an opportunity, sell your vision, get people excited, make progress, start small, and those small wins are very, very important, and they make a huge difference. And just adapt to your team. See what works for your team, and just be willing to and be open to adapt to that. And this is kind of a contentious thing, but I just have to leave a note for my fellow designers. I don't know if there are a lot of designers in the room. Are there a lot of designers in the room? Right? All right, there's a lot of designers in the room, okay. And I do believe that a design system needs to be developer first. I have like my front end guy over there, Ned. He works with me in the design system, and we have a lot of back and forth about like what should we do, and then I'm very particular with how we name things, and he's very particular. But in the end of the day, it's developers will use it. Users will see the code that the developers built, not what you designed in your design system. So keep that in mind when you're doing it. It's not going to be your Figma or your sketch library that's going to be in the user's hand. So if you keep that in mind, I'm telling you, it's going to go a lot smoother the whole time. Thank you.
So we're just going to have some questions. I'll start with my question.
Yeah.
How did you guys come up with Genesis?
That's a good question. So like we had a lot of like mythology, Greek mythology things in our rooms are like Athena, Olympus. Like those are the names of our rooms in our building. So we just basically ran a survey. We sent it to the whole company. Here's like 10 names, pick it.
What does it mean?
Genesis is basically the beginning, right? So I think that's what really kind of drawn people is that it's like a new beginning. That was the idea.
Any other questions?
Question over. Hello, hello, hello. Is this on? Is this on? How about now?
Yeah.
Question down here.
Hi,
Hi.
great presentation.
Thank
I have a question about the reverse process.
Yeah.
Was it a one-time thing? Would you continue doing it over and over for the mobile launch?
Yeah.
Or what are the pros and cons about it?
Yeah, I think like the big cons is that you get a product that that might not be super, I'd say, like tested before you actually get into the hands of the product of the users, right? Because if you have design specs and you QA it with design specs, you can make sure that the component is built the way you want it to be built. So I think the biggest challenge is that now, and it's never over because I think like we're at the point we'll never catch up to the mobile developers unless we get a lot of designers. But right now we're always like playing catch, right? So we always have to grab the component and then analyze it, isolate it, and then talk to the developers and now let's improve it and now let's make it better. But there's the pros where you just didn't have to have that kind of discussion. The component already exists. Now it's about like getting them to collaborate with you and work with you and making it better. Because that's also hard, right? Like they might be like, oh, this is good enough, right? Like why am I gonna change pixels and like 10 pixels padding now it's gonna change and break things everywhere. They need to be committed to that. And that kind of needs to be an understanding is that things might change and there might be rework, but it's worth it in the end because you'll have it documented and you'll make sure that it'll be for every use case that you want.
So I actually have like a bunch of questions, but I'll I'll start with
You can email
one.
it to me.
Yeah,
after
I
too.
might
Yeah,
actually,
for sure.
because I think this is a similar situation to one I was in. But
Cool.
so you had a stat there that like developers save 25% and designers save 50%. That was a question that
No, I'm
I
kidding.
got in, oh, so that's what it was. It was,
No, it's honestly how we got there, and I don't know if that's your question.
Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
We were like, yeah, like, and how did you measure that? Because
Yeah.
I've been asked literally that question.
Yeah, I think like you can never like quantify unless you want to be super analytic and like actually track how much time a developer spends doing each thing that they do, which no one does, right? Like, so we kind of ballpark that, right? And you have to talk to the developers. And we actually had a real scenario, which was before we built this sign-in page, we actually had to build it in our in our old code base, basically. So we knew that that sign-in page took us about 4 days to build, right? And then as soon as we created Genesis, we built the exact same page in 1 day, right? So that gives us that kind of like 25%, 75% increase. Yeah.
Question at the back.
Hi, great presentation, thank you. I understand how you build accessibility into components, but I'm wondering, especially with an app like yours, how do you build privacy into your design system? Like how does that work?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think like in terms of privacy, we can only set up guidelines, right? Like it's really how you use the components that you have. We have definitely some ways of when you're using inputs and when you're creating the kind of like different options or variables for your inputs, you can set up those privacy settings in them. But usually it does end up with basically the guidelines that you have to provide as a as a company. What are the guidelines that you want to provide, right? So what we did, we have a whole section in our ethics page where we say like, what is the data that we share and what is the data that we don't share? What's our policy when it comes to data sharing and data consent? So I think it's more like, it's not at a component level, but it is at a system level. So that's why we don't have it injected in each component specifically. We do have it as the whole system, what it is that we believe in and what rules do we follow when it comes to data and privacy.
Hey,
Hey.
Great presentation.
Thank
My
you.
question is really about momentum. So after you built that first sign-in page and you spent that week doing that, there's a lot more in the system than just a sign-up page.
Yep.
So how did you maintain momentum on the design system? Because that's kind of the big problem that I'm having now.
Yep.
We got it to a place, it hasn't matured beyond that. I struggle to keep momentum on it because I think the buy-in part is, it's not just a one-time thing, it's like a constant battle. So do you guys have a dedicated team? Is it a contribution from a lot of different teams? Like what's the actual work that goes into keeping that momentum?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like we honestly have a community, right? Like we don't have a dedicated team to just build components. So what we try to do is actually prioritize the components that we have, that we want to build, and then hope and share with the developers that when they're building, there's always the opportunity for the designer that's on their team to say like, you're using a new component, or like we can take this opportunity to build that new component that we have on our roadmap. So creating that roadmap in terms of priorities, we just did a prioritization exercise of all the components you could build, which ones are the most important to you. For the developers, like which ones do you use the most, which ones will give you more value, right? So from that prioritization exercise, we took our top 5 and we have that list. So as soon as we have anyone that has a little bit of capacity or that's working on a feature that has that component, we're gonna ask them to, hey, and that's when we have the conversation with product managers, hey, like let's spend 1 more day to actually build this component and add it to the Genesis library that anyone can use. So it's very like on an ongoing like case basis.
I think we have time for just one more question.
So my question is about organizations that may have legacy processes involved in the output of what the design system is creating.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about the end result of a design system and the people working directly on making it. But what about the people who will need to use it and have that influence on whether it gets bought in and the change resistance to maybe new tools or different ways of making the process work so that the design system works with the company and not against it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing that worked really well for us is that we involved the people that were working in it, we involve them really early in the process, right? I know that doesn't help you. You're already far along in the process. To us, that was really, really helpful. I think like something that you can try to do is really to start communicating more. I think like the more you communicate it, sometimes there's reasons why they're pushing back, right? Like try to understand what those reasons are. Why are they so afraid of trying new things or new technologies, right? What's their end goal, right? Like, do they want to move forward or do they want to stay where they are? I think those are conversations that you need to have, and there's no like real solution to that because it comes down to people, right? Like that's all it comes down to. So how can you make them feel part of the community? How can you make them feel part of that vision that you're selling for your design system and your company? How can you involve them there? I think that's really key, and that would unlock that kind of like collaboration in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Diogo.
Thank you. Thanks.
Round of applause. So our next speakers, do you guys want to just come up and set up? We have Jake and Mostafa. So Jake is a product design manager at Snaptravel, where he leads the design team and spearheads the design system, Atlas. So previously he's worked at agencies around Toronto, consulting for several startups and enterprise companies. Mostafa here is a senior product manager at Snaptravel. He's been in product throughout your career, managed product teams, and built a range of products from SaaS to marketplace to e-com and apps. So they're going to be talking about launching lean design systems. So they're going to talk through their journey of building out a lean and mean design system and the challenges with that. So, welcome.
Yeah, you get the fancy stuff. Britney Spears.
Fancy mic check.
Does it work? No.
Fancy mic check too.
Now we're good? Yeah. It's about to get a lot more awkward. Cool. Right. Like kind of the intro was. So my name's Jake. Head the design team at Snaptravel. Been there for just over a year. One of the first projects when I arrived was actually building and implementing a design system with Mostafa and the team that was there. We're going to kind of go through what was the process. Not so much like what's the actual design system look like, what's each component, but more how did we kind of get through this in about 6 months with a really small team. Some last pieces, just basically when we arrived and where we started was, do we need one? Some of that piece was just understanding the balance of designers to developers in our company, and that was kind of the problem we were having. We had 2 designers at the time and about 10 developers, and we were constantly just playing catch up, along with some other stuff that we'll talk about. But I'm gonna hand out to Mostafa to kick it off.
Sounds good. All right. My name is Mostafa again. I joined Snaptravel as kind of the first product manager, helped grow the product team, and build great products with Jake and myself. I'll quickly give you a brief intro about what Snaptravel does. Basically, we really believe that a lot of people are changing their behaviors of how they communicate with their friends. Basically, they usually use text as one of the main ways to communicate with friends. We don't see why they can't do the exact same thing when they're communicating or interacting with companies. And that's kind of, so then basically we allow users to be able to interact with us, to be able to book hotels, flights, through messaging with a mixture of messaging, UI, and real human agents as well. For me to start, I'll kind of quickly give you, everybody has a different definition for what a design system is. I'll quickly give you our definition of what design systems are. We really think of them as collections of elements that are supported by rules and interactions for them to drive purpose. Alrighty, so we usually started off with kind of why do we need to build a design system. And usually without a design system, every new project and every new hire increases chaos in the process. So every team I've been a part of, I see kind of a pattern that looks like this. We start off with a team, we have a new feature or a new update, or somebody comes up with a new idea, we add a new team member that has different design preferences compared to the other team members. And sometimes a lot of these decisions that are made make sense when you're looking at things in that page. But then when you take a step back and you look at the whole system and all the pages and how they're connected, you end up finding a lot of issues and a lot of technical and design debt, because you end up with a lot of shades of gray and a lot of different kinds of buttons that do the exact same thing, which made sense on that page, but when you take a step back in the other pages, those accordions or buttons or whatever may be existed in some way, sort of form. So obviously this ends up leading into having software development processes really becoming slower and slower. So you end up having lower velocity. User experience also suffers because it's inconsistent for the user. So it's very tough for them to get that learning curve and understand where things are going to be at. And then obviously the big obvious one is getting design and technical debt. But thankfully, we're not alone. A lot of companies face these problems. That's why a lot of bigger companies invested a lot of time and resources into design systems. But obviously, we're not bigger companies. We're small companies, startups dying, almost about to die sometimes, trying to move fast, trying to find product market fit. So we don't have that luxury of thousands of engineers or hundreds of designers or whatever it may be. So for us, really had to start off, okay, how do we get buy-in? And Diogo touched on a lot of these really great points. How we did it is we kind of used these kind of 4 main ways to be able to get buy-in. First, we really needed to figure out who we needed buy-in from, basically. So this varies from company to company. It really depends on the organization. Sometimes it's the CEO, sometimes it's the head of product, sometimes it's CTO. In our case, it was the CTO. So now that we have our target, we figure out, okay, how do you annihilate the target? No, I'm kidding. But the next part is we needed to figure out, okay, how do we involve allies to be able to get co-ownership here? I know Diogo asked how many designers are in the room, but how many engineers are in the room? Okay, there's some. How many product managers are in the room? Okay, there's some too. Great. So a big part of trying to understand design systems is you need to understand that it's not for designers. It's actually for everybody. So you need to not to go to war alone, and you really need to build a combined initiative with the engineering team, the product management team, and get executive buy-in, because that will really help increase your chances. So as long as you get more people on your side, you'll increase your chances of getting executive buy-in in the end of the day. And you really need to understand that it's not really like a beautiful set of components built in your preferred Sketch platform or Figma or whatever it may be. It's really a set of design and coding principles that allow you to build UI components that are then ready to be used in your product. So for them, it's really as important as it is for you. Okay. So getting buy-in, the third thing is focusing on value proposition. So how we really looked at it, we divided it in multiple categories. So the first category is scalability. We really think design system will be able to allow us to be prepared to both scale the design team and the engineering team, because it allows us to move at a much faster rate. Second thing is creativity. So by building a repository of like these rules and components, you stop thinking about the pixels and like this has this drop shadow and the small micro interactions when you click on a text field and the label goes to the top or whatever it may be. You actually start thinking about solving real problems, improving the user experience by a large magnitude, and that's where you actually innovation happens in the end of the day, right? So you stop thinking about the small stuff and you start sweating the big stuff, which is what's important, especially in a startup. User learning curve. So obviously when everything is consistent, the user learning curve is a much better because they can predict where your UI, what your UI is gonna look like, where the buttons are gonna exist, because they all kind of follow these set of rules and principles. And then employee onboarding. This is actually really, really, really important. For like one of the biggest factors about a company being successful or not is its people, right? And if you bring in new people to the company, you want to ensure that they're successful. And the faster you can do that, the more, the higher your chances of success and actually moving faster. So building a design system allows employees to be able to be onboarded very quickly. They can start churning out designs. They understand what rules and principles exist in the company, and they can adapt their own style into those principles. The next thing is updates. So it'll be much, much faster to update things. In the previous world, we used to have different types of buttons, for example, and if you want to update one, you have to update all the other components as well. In this case, if you're using the same type of buttons, the same type of accordion, whatever it may be, if you update in one area, that should update automatically across the whole application, and it makes your life much, much easier. When you're fixing bug in one area, it gets fixed everywhere else as well. And then last but not least, themes. So this allows you to prepare your products for themes. And this might not be important for your type of product, but if you're trying to prepare your product to be a white label solution or a product for third parties, this is super crucial, and it opens up your ability to be able to do that. And then the next and last thing about getting buy-in is being prepared for questions and pushback. And obviously these questions are going to differ between company to company, but you really just need to do your diligence, think about it, maybe even talk to people on the side before you go into a big meeting so that you're not stuck in a big meeting and not prepared for answers to some of these questions that each stakeholder is going to have. Some of the questions that we got is like, how much time will it take? Or what's the initial negative impact on all the stuff that we already agreed we're going to work on this quarter? Or how are you planning on rolling this out? What if this lowers our funnel conversion? We're an e-commerce company in the end of the day. It would really suck if we launch a design system or actually spend 6 months building a design system and then launch it all of a sudden, and then conversion is going down, and then we're like, okay, great, we have to roll back the whole thing because we don't know what's happening, right? So that's really important. And there's a bunch of other questions that you kind of need to really think about and be able to be prepared for it. Now I'm just gonna pass it off to Jake to talk to you about how you're going to approach this.
All right. So let's get into this. You're about to launch a design system. So you've got the buy-in, everybody's, yeah, let's go ahead, let's figure out what we need. So some of the talks that we had early on when we were trying to figure out ours is, how are we gonna launch this? Is this gonna be something that's like a specific product line first? Is it gonna be something that's like maybe a login page first, feature, flows? Those are some big conversations that you need to have. Some things that you wanna understand there is like, what's something that's gonna allow us to make maybe several components and impact users in a certain way that makes it easier for us to test later. So for us, like Mostafa was saying, being an e-commerce company, we wanted to be able to get some stuff out, see how users were interacting with it, see what the data was showing, so it was key to actually find a single flow that we could hit first. The last piece for us was also understanding, once this is all good, are we gonna launch this 10% users, 50, 100? How are we gonna actually roll that out, or is it gonna be one day everything kind of switches over? The key here is just aligning with your team about that goal and having those early conversations. So part of that was actually what was so successful about allowing us to do this in 6 months is everybody's kind of been in one of these situations. So you're talking with your product managers, your developers, everybody's in the room, and we're saying we want to make a drop down. So here's what Mostafa's thinking about what a drop down is or how that's going to work or how we're going to document it. Here's kind of what he was able to say in the meeting, what I heard, what I came back with. That's not to say that like what somebody should be thinking dictates your design, but when it comes to something like documentation or things, now we're totally misaligned. We've got to come back into the room, we've got to figure that out, and we've wasted some time there. So, designers, creatives, anybody else in the room, we have this amazing superpower to be able to draw things communicate, sit down together, work together. If that's, spending a week in the same room together to figure these things out. But again, this is fixing problems where now, we're not presenting things back to people. We're just working as one team. We're moving forward. That was kind of some of the big stuff for us. What are you going to build this on? So like Mostafa started to hint at, for us, really moving forward there, potentially being able to theme this. How do we start to get a couple developers, couple designers on something? We're a startup. We don't have a lot of time to potentially build this from scratch. So the way we started to think about this is we've got an open field and we need to build a house. Are we going to hire some contractors and bring in IKEA, or are we going to go cut down the trees ourselves? So for us, it wasn't viable to cut down the trees. So we started to leverage material design. So this is something that most people in the design community already know. They've seen the sites, they've seen the documentation. Mostafa will cover it later, but we were able to find a really good React library that helped us on the development side. Again, back to that real conversation, this was sitting with all the engineers, the engineering managers in a room and having a real discussion and going through all the options that we could and saying, okay, if we build from scratch, here's what this kind of looks like. If we use material, here's what this looks like. If we use X or Y library, maybe this is what this looks like. The other piece is the support around this. So the ability to kick this up and have a lot of support from a design community, the other side on the development side as well. Another piece is what is kind of that structure of how you're going to build this stuff. So this wasn't something that we reinvented. This is something that you can adopt and learn. For us, it was using the Atomic kind of system. This also leveraged really good kind of integration how material design was put together as well. But both of these things for a startup were allowing us to really get moving faster, and it might be something a year, 2 years from now that we start to remove from our product and go back into like our own kind of world. But that's really saved us a lot of time. Okay, so from there we really just started to get into like assessing our situation. So we were starting with a product that was already in market. This is kind of what we're dealing with. Don't really need to say much about it. There's like inconsistencies, misalignments, there's different colors. We're even talking about the contents in different ways. A lot of UX issues that we were learning from users as we started to assess what was in there. So we're just going to say bye to that. So back, theme of the night, collaboration. So we sat in the room. We brought the developers that had built the previous version, the designers, the product managers, everybody sat in a room. We printed everything out, and we just started to talk about what was live in the world. What were these different pieces trying to do? What were they trying to accomplish? What were they solving? And really making sure that we had clarity on what all of that was doing. This really allowed us to then put together a little bit of a catalog. And this isn't to say what exactly we were going to build. There's a lot of stuff in here missing. There's a lot of stuff we removed. But at least now we had kind of what was in the system right now, what was living, and if we were going to move off of that, where did we need to start? So now we have this framework. We've got good alignment with everybody in the room. We've got this catalog. We're ready to go. This is often where we see a lot of teams kind of like pause, right? And this is now, okay, where do we go? So again, looking at that catalog, looking at everything we needed, how many product lines, there's just all these kind of unknowns. It becomes very intimidating. We were sitting down and we were trying to figure out what's that perfect little section that we can start with. So again, like I was saying, where's something where maybe there's a good section that we can test with users, there's enough people using that, it's got a different variety of some components, but maybe some components that are shared across it so we can really start to give that a run. And knowing that as we were launching these things, we wanted to monitor it, so being able to kind of like pull that piece out a little bit. And then really, once we pulled that piece out, that became what our we love to use the framework now, next, later. That was our now. So that little piece, plus like a lot of those base systems, so when you think of like our grids, our spacing, our type colors, that's all also in that piece. But this is making sure that we were really kind of strategically thinking about where our starting point is, where we can go next and where we can go later. And then we actually have like a sizable couple things to go for. So instead of this intimidating design system that you look at and you're like, we have 600 things to kind of go after, let's just focus on 10 right now and figure out how we get there. Once we started kind of getting into there and started building some of these, it's really about a mindset of once everybody's in the room is understanding that a system in design is not a piece of art. This isn't something you're going to put up in a museum. This is something you're going to iterate on, you're going to come back to. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be things that go out and users are going to think are horrible. But the fear of thinking that it's a piece of art is going to stop you from launching that. You know, you got to put it in a controlled kind of zone. So for us, it was launching to like 10%, 50, 100. And we knew, let's put this out to 10% of people and see what we learn, pull that out, and then learn from it and kind of keep going. The other piece of it, which was also talked about in the other one, is working closely with your engineers. So basically, when I started to get into this, it's sitting next to that front-end engineer, that person that's building that design system. I can design a bunch of stuff and try to figure out how that's going, but once it's in the code, once it's living, that's where the two of you or even the whole team needs to be really tight-knit on that. We need these components to work outside a single use case, so then going through all those situations. So what happens when I change, and this is now desktop versus mobile? What happens if it doesn't load? What happens if this state changes? All that kind of stuff you can design for, but once you actually get in the code, it's a different world, right? And then the last piece, kind of like we mentioned, is we were trying this in certain areas, but we really didn't just do a one big bang and switch everything over. So this is probably what ate up some of our time, but I feel it was pretty key in the success of getting it out, is we still had our original product live in the world, and we started to build this new system. So at some point, both are going to be live in the world, and the design team and the front-end team is going to have to bite the bullet a little bit, and there's a couple features that we had to develop and build on both stacks. But what this allowed is we could then look at the analytics. Mostafa could start to come in and start to like analyze that and look and say, okay, you know, click-through is keeping the same, and the conversion's keeping the same. We're saying, okay, we're testing this with people, and we're hearing that it's working better. We're hearing that we're happy on this side, and eventually you can kind of ditch that old system. The other thing is things have to change along the way. So this is just having that open mindset, similar to it not being a piece of art, right? So we may start with a small circle as our first component. We test, we learn that it's a big one, and then eventually we learn, okay, well, there's now 3 versions of this. The key here, though, is making a very strategic meeting about this and kind of talking about it and figuring out, okay, do we need another component? It's very easy to spin out of control, and you're back to kind of that first audit that we had where it's great, we have a design system, but every page has a custom component, and we're back to the beginning again. So for us, it was really just kind of being a committee and being hard on each other and saying, okay, well, what does a user really need in this situation? What do we have in our library or our tool belt? Have we tried or tested that? And if not, let's kind of go down that path. And on that, the last kind of point for this, which was huge, was the design team and the front-end team gets together regularly and talks about what are we actually putting out to the world. So let's review what's out there. Let's make sure that we're also auditing and treating this design system as a feature. If it starts to get out of control, how do we pull this back a little bit? Let's not hurt the job of what a component is trying to do, but let's not just build new ones because it's easy or convenient at the time. So I'm going to give you a quick kind of look under the hood. Once we really start to understand and define the needs of the components, what are the principles of our design system, we got to work in building some of the features. So this is just a quick example of like a card component that we have in our system. So we have multiple variants that we need to provide to the system, but we need to really then work with that engineering team between design and engineering to understand, okay, you know, something like this background is going to need to change depending on the situation. Sometimes we're going to have a header and content. Sometimes we're just going to have the header. Maybe the button shows or doesn't show. But in the end, how do we really make sure that this is still following certain rules and keeping as one component? And then basically just another little peek, once we kind of have these and we're putting together our spacing system, our grids, things like that, as long as we understand that each component is starting to serve its purpose and we know where users want to kind of go, now how do we really start to understand how we construct these pages? Another piece that we did start to put together is a system around our page templates. So something that we had noticed in the previous thing, we have about 15 screens in our product. Every single one had a different header, different footer, different state. How do you go back? Things like that. So we actually started to have these shells that we created, which then allow us to say, these are our starting points, and this is, if it's a page that needs to go back, here's what it looks like. If it's a primary page with a navigation, here's where we kind of start. Gives us that good kind of foundation and groundwork to start off of. The next piece is like the same way that you do with any of your other designs is start to figure out your implementation guidelines for your components. This is going to be something that's going to be huge. Your developers are going to love you, and your product managers are going to love you. But it's also just doing that good deed when you start to bring other designers on, or maybe another front-end dev designer picks up that project and they're working on the version 2, right? Everybody knows what was designed, why it was designed, how it was created. And then the last thing is like, go learn more while expanding the system in an educated fashion. So this is just understanding how your system's doing out in the world. Ours, we got out in about 6 months, it launched in the summer, and I think we've iterated on most of the pages and changed. It's a living thing, it's not a piece of art. So we think of this as like a little caterpillar, and eventually it'll be a butterfly, and yeah, then we'll be all good. So what's next for our team? So basically after a couple iterations and kind of getting in there, we're now sitting back and saying, okay, we feel like we're in a good position where when we were moving, documentation was really light and fast. So this could have been a couple Google Docs, could have been some notes in a sketch file, a couple notes in Storybook. So now we want to get to the point of now, how do we make this less blurry and kind of continue to move forward? You know, we've hit those marks as a startup to really align everybody and get moving forward, but now we want to make sure that we don't fall into that same mistake. The other piece is like a lot of our principles and ways of building this was common language and discussion between the teams. You know, we all understand what we're saying, okay, we need this to be transparent, we need clarity here. But how do we really align that with the bigger team? So in the other talk, Diogo was talking about, you know, now how do we make sure that like the business and the sales and the operations teams all understand what this global kind of principles and language of our design system are? Cool. Throw it back to Mostafa for a bit.
Alrighty. Hello. Okay, perfect. So this is usually where I talk to engineers and give them tips about how to build a design system, but I realized there's probably not a lot of engineers that are going to be here tonight. So, so I tailored my slides a little bit to designers, and I'm sure you sometimes don't understand engineering and it feels like a black box, right? So in certain cases, when you're trying to kind of get buy-in, you also have to understand how to push back on them, because they can tell you, oh, you want me to build this from scratch? Like, that's so daunting. Like, no, I'm good. So in that case, thankfully, I had some understanding of the technical complexities that that arise with building things on their own or from scratch. So I was able to kind of help shepherd this for both the product and design team. So one of the first things that you really need to do is you kind of have to make a call, especially as a startup. Like I mentioned, not a lot of resources, limited time. You can build it from scratch, and you can have 100% satisfaction that you've designed every single inch of your design system. Or you can have 70 to 80% of the satisfaction of building on top of existing rules and components that exist with design system frameworks like Material, for example, or even in our case, for the engineering side, using a component library that's also built off of Material. So from both the design and kind of the engineering side of things, we've decided to make our decision was B. We're like, okay, we need to move faster. This was really the only way for us to get buy-in from both the engineering side, from the business side. We're like, hey, we're actually going to use this component library that has almost every single component that you can think of, and then some. And there's about like 50,000 people that contribute to this library every month. So it was kind of a no-brainer. For our case, almost everything we have on a front-end perspective was built on React. So I did some digging around. I found Material UI. It's a React library that's very well tested. The documentation is amazing, surrounded by a huge community. But this is not the only one. There's a lot that exists out there. So you can use that as your kind of test bed, and then you can customize this as much as you want. It's not like somebody did the work for you. You actually still have to do a lot more work to be able to make it look and feel what you want it to look like. But you're building off of something that already existed. And then kind of one of the next things that you need to talk to your engineers about is how you're going to roll it out. And the reason I say you really need to do that, obviously this depends on the type of product that you have, but this also changes the way that you attack a design system. So if you say, hey, are we separating mobile versus desktop? Like, are we gonna convert all of mobile first and then go for the desktop? Maybe then the designers don't need to rebuild all the pages together, both in mobile and desktop at the same time. Maybe they can just do mobile first and then they can do desktop, and that buys you time. So as you convert some of the pages to mobile, then like as they the engineers are working on the mobile one, then you can start working on the desktop one. Other questions that you can ask is, hey, how are we going to release this? Is it going to be page by page? Like I told you, we're in an e-commerce company, so conversion for us is key. So when we're converting into this new design system, we're A/B testing it, and we are making sure that we change it page by page. Because if conversion goes down for a specific page, we want to catch it in that and isolate it to that page versus let's build this whole thing and then turn it on, and then conversion is not doing so well. And it's going to be much, much tougher to dissect and analyze what the problem or what's causing that. And then, and then some of the other questions that you can ask are, do we want to roll it out to some of the users, all of them, 50%, kind of. All these are the type of questions that you need to sit down, similar to what Jake mentioned, sit down with your engineers and talk to them about these things, because those will also make a difference on how you approach building a design system from a design side. And then the next thing is you actually build it, but you need to also ask questions about how many engineers can we dedicate to this. And these are kind of the three things that we had to think about. Hey, we need to maintain our current platform. There's always bugs that are going to arise. There's things that we need to fix. Also, we need to keep shipping new features. We need to add more value to our users, more value to the business. But then we also want to implement this design system. And you need to figure out, based on the engineering resources that you have, how many people are you going to dedicate to it? Or are you going to dedicate 5 points per sprint? Or are you going to dedicate 2 full people out of a team of 15 people to work on it? And each one has its pros and cons. What we've decided to do is we decided to dedicate 2, and sometimes there were 3 engineers. They were working on it on a sprint. It helped them because they gained a lot of momentum when they were going through it. And they had the context. They understood what Material UI is, how to do testing in it, how to do so many different things, and allowed them to get that momentum. But at the same time, we also realized when we're building new features, why not build them in the new design system instead of building it in the old one, right? So slowly kind of tackled it bit by bit, and each of the engineers got onboarded onto this new design system or component library. And then slowly they figured out, okay, that's, I guess within about 6 months, we ended up rolling out the whole design system for all the pages. So we started rolling it out, I think 2 months in, and then slowly rolling it out page by page until we got it to 100% of our users, and then we left it on for a while to ensure conversion or other metrics that we were looking at were not impacted in a negative way. Sometimes things were impacted in a negative way, but it was positive in another different way that it made sense overall. And then the last thing I would tell you is use Storybook to independently test and document some of these components. We really love Storybook. We're huge fans of it. Let me show you what it actually looks like. It looks like something like this, where you can see some of your components. You can click on them. So this is like a toast message where you can see, you can actually change it. You can see the error styles. You can look at buttons. You can look at different sizes of buttons. You can change the text. You can change the primary. You can see all the things that you want. So as a designer, when an engineer builds this, you can actually go in and QA this stuff on your own, and you can say, hey, this looks great. This is exactly what I envisioned and what I designed, and things are great. And you can use this now as kind of like your library or your design system documentation, so that then anybody that needs any new component, they can easily refer it to this. And that's it. Thank you. Do you mind?
Let's go.
So we're just gonna start with Q&A. I have a question for you guys. As far as a lean design system, how do you guys build in usability testing within your more unique components?
Yeah. So some of it was basically, as I was saying, we had the 2 tracks going on, but we also had, as things were kind of going through development and QA, we were working on the next piece. And we started to find time in between that to be able to kind of pull in the user testing and kind of that. As a company, we kind of split this in several different areas. We have existing users in the platform, which we have a queue of contacting them and kind of working with them. So these are people that already know our product. So now what does this new kind of flow experience happen? And then the other two pieces, we are bringing people in and talking to them, but we also use other platforms like UserLook and user testing to be able to get that. So really we're looking at like, what are we trying to test with this specific flow that we're getting out, or this specific screen? Is it general usability? Is it something that, maybe somebody who knows our platform we want to test with? But it was key in kind of finding that out and being able to change and iterate on those screens, yeah.
Questions?
Hello guys, actually I had same task as you have. I need to implement design, actual material design library to product. And I have a question, I have like mobile first. How I can scale it for web? Because we have really big problem with material design at all, because they don't have actually consistency for web. How you handle it?
So are you talking about like mobile, like native mobile versus web,
Yes.
Whether that's mobile web or desktop web?
Yes. For example, you have like, for example, mobile first. Yes, you have every single element, for example, in your library, and I have, for example, material design for your library. Yes, and I can use it, no problem. But for web, how you handle it? For example, you need to implement your mobile design to web design. For example, we have like some floating buttons on web, like tables, etc., etc. How you handle it?
So for us, when we built the design system, we built it on React, and we use React for both our native applications. So we use React Native for that part, and then from the website, we use React, and that, whether that's for mobile or desktop web, it applies to both. But there are some minor nuances from a UI perspective. How do you, like for example, drawers. Drawers on mobile come from the bottom, and on desktop we use from the right to the left side. The benefits though about using a component library that existed already is that was already thought for us. So that already existed, and we could actually bring out the drawer from the bottom, we can bring it out from the left, from the right, from the top. We can do whatever we want. It's up to us to make some of those decisions, and sometimes those decisions depended on the page that you're on, the context that you're in, and whatnot. So for us, some of those nuanced thinking, we actually just leverage the existing component library and be able to make some of those decisions based on that. Well.
Hey, back here. You mentioned like releasing a lot of the products through your new design system iteratively over the 6 months' time. What sort of challenges, if you had any, around adoption? And as you were starting to release these new products and pages through your design system, how did you come across those challenges or tackle them within the teams?
So from a user side, there was some things and hurdles that we hit. So people may start an experience on the old designs, and then all of a sudden they're into a new experience. So there's a little bit of this kind of Frankenstein stage that we had to accept and understand. That also then puts a little bit of pressure to kind of keep the train going. So when you're talking to business or stakeholders, they're saying, okay, now I understand why we've got to kind of get through this. And then from the actual like design and development team, there is that couple months where we were developing and designing features for both stacks. You get to that point eventually where it was a little bit of, we're just going to be designing this on material now. So, but yeah, it was like there was some overhead along the way, and it's more just being clear and concise and talking to that team about that. So maybe we were designing or coming up with, hey, we want to run an experiment to do this. Talking with Mostafa, talking with our tech leads, and saying, is this something that we feel needs to run on both products at this time, on the new and the old, or is this something that we feel like if we're just going to have to go onto the new one because it's going to be something we'll be testing for longer? So sometimes it was, how long will the test be? If it's something we're going to test for a week, let's throw it on both. If it's something that might be longer, let's keep it on the new one because eventually we might turn that one off. I don't know if that kind of gets to it. Cool.
Yeah. Just have one more question right here. Hello. So you said you had 15 pages or so. Did you do any sort of like user experience enhancements as you went along, or did you do like kind of like one-for-one swap of like, this is a button, this is now going to be a primary button?
For the most part, we did one-for-one swap, but we couldn't resist the urge of doing some UX improvements here and there.
Yeah, there was definitely some like heavy hitting things that needed to be fixed as we went forward. So knowing when we came into the product and we started to audit, there was already testing that we were doing to just kind of say, where are we at? So I would say we kind of made a list of taking like maybe the top 5 kind of things in the product that like seem pretty straightforward, and that was a good bet to start testing them. But yeah, some of the stuff that helped us move really fast was that one-to-one at that point, and then doing extensive testing on now, okay, we're on the new system. Let's see, do we get the same results when we start to test? What are the different problems now that we're getting? And that's really where, you know, iterating on version 2 and version 3 has really allowed us to kind of work and change those. Yeah.
I think we're at time. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jake and Mostafa. Round of applause, guys. So if you guys still have questions, please stick around. Our speakers will be around just to answer your questions. Oh, it's right there.
Here comes the slides. 1,
So-
2, 3, 4.
I'm just going to talk about our next meetup, which is, March 4th. I can still advance it.
Give it a minute.
Doo-doo.
If this takes 3 more seconds. All right. Who wants to hear a joke? Yeah? Unplug it and replug it? All right, while you replug it in. How do you perform first aid on code? You console it. You console it. Yeah. Is good? I'm out of jokes.
We can just still, I can still talk. Yeah?
Sure.
So our next meetup is March 4th. It'll be at Wealth Simple. And the theme will be accessibility and inclusivity in design systems. So it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, plus design system in one, which is awesome. So the level is about intermediate advanced. So Wealth Simple is kind of a smaller space. So as soon as it goes live, be sure to RSVP and get your seat. We're still not up.
I tried turning it off and on again. I did my best.
Darn. That's okay. So I think that's it. That's a wrap. Thank you for attending. You guys can get in touch with us. Thank you again, Rangle, for the location and the food and all the goodness. And yeah, we have a QR code here.
Yeah, before
We're
you
hoping to get your feedback, because obviously feedback is a gift, and if you guys can just let us know what you loved, what you hated, so that we can actually improve. And we're treating this like a product, and so feedback would be much appreciated.
Maybe I should walk around with a laptop in front of me.
Or just come up, run up, and yeah.
Please bring your cell phones later, but if it's not your first time here at Design Systems Community, welcome back. If it is your first time here, see you next time.
Thank
Please,
you, guys.
We would love your feedback. So if you walk on your way out, please scan this QR code or go to the bit.ly link on your way out, because if you liked what you saw tonight, let us know. If you don't like what you saw tonight, let us know. Please. Ideas on topics. What would you like to see next time? It's all in the form.
Enrico,
Yes.
what's the bit.ly link?
The bit.ly link, if you have a web browser on your cellular device, go to bit.ly/capital
Good job.
D, capital S, capital C, dash, this is really not going to work, capital F, capital E, capital B, 5. Why did I bother?
Thank you.
Come on down. Talk to us. Good night.
Sorry that
No, it's all good.
flickering at the end. That's
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Hope you were comfortable.